and that it then basically became a period of revolutions after we moved on from the period of time known as the Enlightenment. So I'm excited. This is like, these pictures are showing you someone from the past, Isaac Newton, for example, here, who we've talked about on History in the Stars, and we know he was a hidden alchemist, and he was a very interesting character who liked to stay in his room by himself and look at light through windows and prisms and all of that. And then Oppenheimer was his same generation in our
How
world.
interesting is that, right?
Yeah. And then there's Bach and Billie Holiday. They're my examples here. Pluto and Leo. We've got Benjamin Franklin, one of our favorite topics here. And he would be of the same type generation as, oh my gosh, why am I blanking on his name? Apple guy. Steve Jobs. But really, it's not going to be so much looking at the astrology, but looking at these people and then thinking of these different prompts each time. I'll be asking people to think about, looking at what someone of your same generation did in the past, and then looking at what can we learn from that? What can we apply to our lives today? So I'm super excited about it.
Yeah, I love how in depth you went on that landing page to show people what you're doing and connecting all these generations, and really actually connecting for people now to look at their own generation. And of course, we all know people with the other Pluto generations, but really going through so many different layers of history in those generations and connecting them. I haven't seen anybody do that yet.
Yeah, I don't know whether people do it or not, but I am really excited about looking at the history of the Enlightenment and the sorts of things that I'm looking at. So right now I was actually looking at what people are in preparing for it. For my first session, it's going to start next week on the 12th. And I've been looking at the cosmology of the people at the beginning of this period of time. So in Bach's day, for example, or before Isaac Newton's laws, what did people believe before that? So I'm looking at how they thought of the solar system, or how they saw it as these crystalline spheres, and how someone like Bach is composing music in a world where people think the music composition actually represents the way the world really was organized. They thought of it as a type of divine order, and there was sacred geometry behind it. So I'll start with looking at that level of knowledge, and then we'll be moving up through the Enlightenment and getting into the era where people just, over this whole period of time, people just started to ask way too many questions. And when people start to ask all sorts of questions, they start to want change, or change starts to happen.
I know what's really wild is actually I was with my son this morning and I was thinking of time, and I'm like, he's going to be around for Pluto and Taurus.
Wow.
And I was like, he has Venus there in Taurus, he has Uranus in Taurus, and I was thinking, like, I know you're going to have to go through that time. When I'm not around, I'll leave you. I'm gonna leave him probably my own book just on how to get through life, and my daughter too. But
your daughter's
actually
Pluto
thinking about
Capricorn, right?
Yeah, she's Pluto Capricorn.
And then he's Pluto Aquarius.
Yeah.
Because for this, we don't really have contemporaries, because these people are kids, right? Like, we don't have the Pluto Capricorns as big people yet to know what if they're going to be like Napoleon.
Well, in our family, I'm the Pluto Libra, Sophia's the Pluto Sag, Aurora's the Pluto Capricorn. And it's really only during the period we've all lived through to get that kind of like, and then Asher's Pluto Aquarius, to have 4 Pluto generations in a family 4 union.
That's crazy.
Because that's the fastest Pluto goes,
you
right?
all planned that, the astrologer's family is going to have representatives from all of these generations.
Because, and maybe you can add this to your course just to tell people, is like, when you look at figures of that time, look at their family members and see if you do get many Pluto generations in a family, of like the actual family unit. It sometimes is the same, especially because people had children young then.
Well,
or it's
yeah,
just the
yeah.
next one and that's it.
Yeah, and remember when we looked at Benjamin Franklin, and he's Pluto Leo, and he's dealing with his grandson, right, who was a Pluto Sag.
Yeah.
Especially in the TV show that we've
Right.
talked about before.
And then he's dealing with Washington, who's Pluto Libra. He's dealing with Jefferson, who's Pluto Scorpio. He's dealing with John Adams, who's Pluto Scorpio. If I don't remember, he might be, or I think he was maybe Pluto Libra too.
Was he? I don't
he was
remember. I
Pluto
know
Libra as
Jefferson
well.
is a Pluto Scorpio.
Yeah, he's Pluto. But he's dealing with all these different generational
So you
aspects.
have to.
Yeah.
That's the other thing I'm thinking about in this course is that a lot of times I'm tired of seeing generation bashing that happens a lot now, and I really don't like. I guess maybe because I have kids who are Gen Z, so I don't like the people critiquing young people right now. And what I hope people get out of this is to see what's the contribution of all these different people and how having all these different perspectives on Earth at one time, it leads to when we get to the future, like this, that's the most interesting thing, that you can end up out of all of those people, you get to this world where like it ends with, I have Mary Shelley who wrote Frankenstein. And when you think about those types of people and what they believed and did, it's like a completely different world, because everyone leading up to them set it up so you could imagine a world in which you could write something like Frankenstein as a novel, or imagine.
Is it true that she wrote that based off being in some weird relationship with some guy?
I hadn't heard that, but we'll look into it for sure.
Yeah. There's some really
I think,
interesting background to what got her to write it, but also what a main figure for the feminine there is with her at that time period in making such a huge novel fiction that actually becomes, to this day, people say it at least once every couple months in their life. They'll say, like Frankenstein.
Right.
Right?
Right. I mean, I've seen, there's a movie about her, right? There's a movie
There's
about.
a couple, but there was one recent that's like the kind of movie you and I would like, a drama, kind of historical drama, and more on her love life and how she's dealing with it through writing it, and how he's trying to, and then it's kind of like, is she taking parts of the harsh reality of her relationship with him and adding him into some of the characters and stuff like that. It's really wild. I was like, oh, wow.
Yeah, putting this all together, it really starts to make more sense. For example, like Jane Austen, I put her, she's a Pluto and Capricorn, along with Napoleon there. But when you think about even someone like Jane Austen, and I'm sure you don't spend a lot of time thinking about Jane Austen, but she did her part to really upset and critique structures for women at that time that really made people see how unfair it was to be a woman who's, so, a lot of her novels are about women who are going to lose the home because the home will be given to the male heir. And usually it will go to a cousin. And so they're so concerned about having to get married because that's what the world was like for women at that point. You had to get married.
And even for those conversations, because if you think about her time period of her coming in, it's finally like the ideas of revolution finally are about and have happened. So now it becomes people not thinking of monarchs and bloodlines and how it's just always to the male heir through blood. But this is happening in common folk. This is happening in, it's not just, it's happening everywhere. So as a new society free from monarch, what does that look like now?
Right. And Napoleon was definitely trying that out too.
I know. I love Napoleon. I don't look at him as
a Leo, so.
I mean, trust me, I'm a Leo fanatic. I love him. But I actually, looking at his story and looking at who he was and what he did, I don't think he's that bad of a character as he's been characterized. Same way with Henry VIII.
Henry VIII was a little bit worse of a person, I think. But he's a Pluto Libra, so.
Yeah,
I
just think people look at him like so bad.
But he would, I mean, yeah, from within his time, he was creating the structural changes that led to today. I mean,
Yeah.
he was helping to dismantle the
Very
whole the
Pluto,
church
very
had.
Pluto Capricorn.
Well, yeah, I mean, Napoleon kind of was born into that, but Henry VIII kind of started
Right.
that in his generation, which is
Right.
we're
The
not
prior.
we're not talking about Henry VIII in this one.
Yeah.
But I'd really thought about in doing this class. I could have done a whole class on Henry
Who
VIII.
do you have on the Pluto Libras?
George Washington, of course. This was the best I could get my AI to do with Tulsi Gabbard and Pete Buttigieg.
Oh, Buttigieg.
Buttigieg.
How funny, they
Saluting-
used to be on the same team, now they're not.
saluting George Washington, but
Oh, you got Catherine the Great in there, that's cool.
yeah, really interesting people. Catherine the Great is another really good one that we'll spend some time looking at because she was an enlightened monarch, but more absolutist.
It's
A
very
different way from-
diversified, I like it.
Yeah. So we'll see. It'll depend on
Remember
who's
that
involved too, what we end
that
up talking
Pluto
more
and
about.
Libra and Scorpio, those are the fastest Plutos.
Yeah.
So there's
I
not.
feel like it was
you know,
even faster.
It's in Scorpio the fastest, yeah.
Did I do that one right? But yeah, the Pluto Scorpio, I think we have a little
Fastest.
bit longer one even now than this time, or was it Pluto Libra? But anyway.
No, this one was pretty quick. That Pluto Scorpio, when it's at home, it gets as much as it can, as quick as it can. When it's in Taurus, it's a long one.
Yeah.
But yeah, like it. Also, that Pluto Scorpio one, King George III, that's a great one. Queen
Yeah,
Charlotte.
I mean, I'm sure we'll talk about others, but what's funny is that I kept trying to do images with the Marquis de Sade for this.
Oh, right.
And that is one thing that AI from different sources would not do very many images with him. So
It's
there's
interesting
still-
where it has its funny things. I was going to put it on my screen. So if people
Yeah.
want to get this school, and by the way, all proceeds go to Anne herself. I don't take nothing. You just go to highvibe.tv, you click Dare to Know, and this is that page if you want to, you have issues out there, but it's all here, and you click that, and you'll get access to it, and it will always be in the collection. You'll see that collection just keep going and get access to the lives with her, and even watch recordings forever and have access for them forever. So.
And I had a question, someone asking me, do you have to be a subscriber to High Vibe to get it? And you don't have
No.
to be. But why wouldn't you be? You're missing out.
No.
Everybody knows now after the deep astrology last week. that
No,
you
so if
put
I
up.
sign in, I show people that are out there wondering how High Vibe works. I mean, we really are a network where you can subscribe to get all the content that is done every day, right? But if you're not a subscriber and you just purchase individual like videos or specials, when you come here, you can look at what's called my library. And so like, of course I own the website, so these are all these paid videos and stuff, but it would just be like, oh, here's all your paid videos in here. Right. So you would have her collection in there. Or you can also look at it like your purchases and payments. So this would show you like if you were a subscriber, you know, and if you want to change your subscription or end it or so forth, what devices, because we allow 3 devices at a time per account. And then of course down here in your purchases, it would be here as well. So you can, the new updates that we've done cover everything super easy to navigate. Nobody sees this. This is me as admin, but like, I don't like a selected featured category with videos up there. So, or you can click that Dare to Know at the top, or it's even in the bar, Dare to Know. So that starts August 12th, and Anne's an amazing professor to learn from. So to finally bring Anne to this form is exciting.
I'm looking forward to it. So, and I'm doing it on Zoom so that I'll be able to interact more with people. And
Yeah, within High Vibe, which is really cool. So within the app and everything, you can be watching within her Zoom. That's the actual kind of actual Zoom. So if you wanted to bring somebody on, you could. Stuff like that. It's pretty wild. All right. So how about we start with the astrology of today and how it's connected to where we went through in this time that I was mind blown. So we could show the chart, but first let's just look at these planets. Today, it was just hours ago, Mars just made its ingress into Libra, and we have Uranus in Gemini, and we have Pluto in Aquarius, and they're all in a grand trine. They're all within a degree in this, to 2 degrees with the Mars trine Pluto, but really tight grand trine. And so I went with Anne and we looked at time. So here on August 8th, 2025, it's the exact moment of Mars, what I was looking for, and then August 10th. So for these, it's actually even technically right now, we're here on the 6th. This week is this whole amazing grand trine kite that's also forming with Mars opposite Neptune and Saturn. We didn't even run that part. So this is more rare than all these other times. But to look for that exact, we wanted to find, and it was in 650 and 651 BC, 903 and 904 BC, and then 1157 and 1158 BC. That's it. The time coming up ahead, we do get it again in 2027, 2029, and then we're going to have to wait exactly 200 years. So now, of course, there are Mars, trine Pluto, trine Uranus moments, grand trines in history, but they tend to, there was sort of a pattern, but sometimes that Pluto-Uranus trine is interesting. It's not, the cadence isn't perfect all the time. So you see it, you know, it's kind of a century-based thing. Like you'll see it in a century. Sometimes you'll see a century at the end of one, so then it will miss a whole century and then start at the beginning of that next century, stuff like that. But that's in different signs. It could be in fire, it could be in air, it could be, like in this case, air. And so to get it to where the exact one we had right now that we're going through right now, I mean, it's pretty obvious in this right here, August 8th, August 10th, 2025. Really these peak moments here, and to see that it's only these 3 major date time periods, 3 years in history, and they were in BC.
Yeah, that's funny.
Right? I mean, if you think about it, it's 2,600 years ago plus the 3,000 years ago.
So,
and more.
I know when we did this, we were looking at the trine in other signs.
Right.
You know, it wasn't just air. And it did come up a lot more frequently.
Right.
So I guess my question would be for everyone here is, what's the significance of having this in the air signs?
Yeah.
And was this past one, the past one back in 651 BC or whatever it is, was that also was Pluto in Aquarius?
Yes, I have it all set for only showing Mars in Libra, Uranus in Gemini, Pluto in Aquarius, with a Mars trine Uranus and a Mars trine Pluto. Whenever you do Uranus trine Pluto, you might not see Mars come around during that exact moment. Right? I already know because I have Pluto in Aquarius and I have that Mars trine Uranus and I have that Mars trine Pluto that I'm including that Pluto trine Uranus because Mars is trining Uranus. That's the way you trick the old computer systems. As I showed you where I tried to do, throw a grand trine in there, and the whole computer almost blew up.
Yeah.
That was too much. But yeah, so what makes this unique is that Pluto in Aquarius, Mars in Libra, air, and then Uranus, which is this is much more about societal and the intellect, technologies, and this idea of where the future is going, right? Like Uranus and Gemini, how society is adjusting in its information, how it's communicating, how it's the environments are changing quick. Pluto and Aquarius, that definitely brings out whether there maybe are revolutions or at least major changes, because we've covered so much of Pluto moving from Capricorn to Aquarius. And I think that we've proved through history that it's always major changes of how the world goes and how the old way was ending and a new way coming about in more of a structure sense, or even a government sense, even to religious is a big part too. And then Mars in Libra, though, it's in its detriment, but it's interesting because it's another sign that Mars happens to be in, that's in an air sign, but it's a Venus ruled sign. So if you think about it, you're dealing with Venus. It's not so much about Mars there, and you're dealing with Libra Venus energy, right? Like it's intellectual as well, it's social, and so there's also an interesting trine there, because Mars in detriment isn't the greatest, but it gets this. I said on my Deep Astrology this week, I said, there is no better trine that Mars would really like, right? Mars trine Pluto is amazing. They both are ruled by Scorpio, but that's like the ultimate power of like things going together, getting what you want. And then to get Uranus adds that flair and that excitement and that freedom and that like, let's move about the cabin and we get what we want. Like there's definitely an amazing element to it. And I think in air signs, it definitely brings more of that societal, technological, informational shift. And it also deals with Pluto and Aquarius, as we've seen as we've been in it the last couple of years, crazy weather patterns to oddities in the sky, questions of our origins and our roots. So it was interesting that it actually did take us all the way back to the earliest we could get to was 650 into 651 into 650 BC. And that's like, wow, that's so long ago. I mean, that's we're coming up on like 2,700 years there.
Right. And but at the same time, what's so funny, and I know that this wasn't when the astrology was exactly the same, but to have the recent discovery that connects to this time period too.
Yeah, and that would be actually a great place to start. So as we were going through, and it's a good reminder for people, whenever you're going into BC and you start going into, especially if you're, let's say the first 1,000 years within BC, it's like you go to like the 10th millennium, but the BC, and you have to count the other opposite way, which I always think is interesting. History is history is very much what's been the luck of been found, would you say, as a historian, like what's been discovered through a lot of archaeological digs, stuff that really is truly like discovered more than like people kind of like, oh, I'm interested in that, I'm going to go search deeper. It's kind of like, well, these are things that are found in history that, you know, either they're a seventh wonder of the world or they're something that still is shown, but there is a lot of stuff that's discovered that takes thousands of years to finally get the history on. And everything from that millennium, the first millennium going in BC, right? I feel like we still are finding stuff about it now.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, it gives us an idea of just how much history there's been on this planet, and there's layers and layers of entire civilizations covered over, and archaeologists get out there and find things, and it takes even when things are found. Like we're going to talk about something today that something was found in a society or a civilization that we already knew about, and we already had so much evidence about, right? So it's not like we had to take years and years to understand it. But sometimes things are found and uncovered, and then if it goes against the accepted narrative of either when time was supposed to start, when humans were supposed to start on the planet, when life was supposed to start, right? And we'll find things just like what was found under the pyramids, right? The imaging that came from that. And when is it going to be that we'll actually get the official record about that? Who knows, right? It just takes years and years. And for this, for example, what we're talking about, it was in the 1849, I think, that the biggest discoveries were made in this region.
Correct, yeah.
By the British, who then promptly brought everything back to Britain, brought as much as they could back there to the British Library, or British Museum.
Yeah, so I think that's where I actually would like to start with that history first, maybe before the discovery. Have it right here. So, as we were looking, this is how weird it happened. It was like, oh, there was a palace of, what was his name? The Assyrian king Ashurbanipal. Ashurbanipal. And this is during where Syria is, but the Assyrian king, this is coming in the Babylonian times, kind of coming into where now what we know is Syria today, and the Assyrians and the battles that were happening there, and the old Babylon kind of coming to the end story and switching more into the and also Mesopotamia as well, coming in, and then there's also Greek that starts coming in, and then Roman, right? It's a very interesting period of time, especially for astrology. And that's what I think is the most unique thing about this, is it's all very much tied to actual astrology, literally, is what we actually did reveal. So there's what they call the omen catalog that goes back to that the farthest back date that we looked. And I looked back all the way to 4500 BC. We didn't find another grand trine that we're having in these planets. So 1157, I think, in BC. And so it was in the 12th century BC, in the middle of it, that the Babylonians in old ancient Mesopotamia had, and I'm sure some astrologers have heard about this before, but there was a collection of celestial omens known as the Unima Anu Enlili, which was discovered at the library of the Assyrian king of Ashurbanipal in Nineveh in 651, which is really weird because that's around the time when he became king and was planning on building the library and the palace that held all this information in the world. And what got me messed up was it was like 646 BC is when he made, they say that this thing was fully made. But what blew my mind was that the astronomical diaries, the part 2 of this work of Babylonian astronomers, started exactly in 651 and 652 BC. The second version of these omen books, and actually going until 61 to 60 BC. And what's even weirder is that these ended up in the library of the second grand trine. So like the first grand trine is this book of omens, right? The omen catalog. The second grand trine is the creation of the library and then housing this old omens book, but then taking that old omens book and now these new diaries that are being done astronomically using these old techniques, and then housing those tablets and stuff there as well, and having astronomers there doing that as well, which kind of blew my mind.
Yeah.
Because you can't get any more exact. So it wasn't so much about the temple or the palace and the library. It's a big part of it. But the actual second, written, if you think about it, it's like, okay, there's 600 years of data. Let's now write about the next 600 years. And they start right on the same grand trines.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you have this leader, Ashurbanipal, who then, there he is.
The king of back then it's the Assyrians, right? So
Yeah.
it's like, you know.
King of the Neo-Assyrian Empire. And actually I have a map too, if I, like, just so people can see the world at that time. These are where all the peoples were in 650 BC. Somebody made this map. It just happened to be
Actually, it's
the
a
right
great
year.
map to give a good perspective of things.
And we're talking about in this
Yeah, because we're
area
talking
here.
about 20, is this what, 650s
650 BC.
of BC? So that's 2,600 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, if
so-
you really think about it. I don't know.
I mean, so what's interesting to me is that you happen to have this ruler who's one of the last kings before this empire is going to fall.
Yeah, they say he's the last great Assyrian king.
So what does he do? Like, what is his thing that he's all about? It's the knowledge that he was known to be this highly educated king who thought that knowledge was important, mathematics was important, and to him, he wanted to collect together all of this data that showed, or that he would use himself, and that the state, his state, could use to help rule more effectively. So this wasn't just a library because he wanted to bring together all the knowledge of the world just to look like he was smart. He actually was using the knowledge, and he wanted to bring together knowledge that was going to help rule more effectively. And what's interesting is one of the most important aspects of that was this astrology book that you were talking about. The I can't remember this one, Enuma, Anu, and Lil. And this has been studied, right? It's this whole
And it was all
catalog
written on
of-
tablets.
Yeah, so these are all clay tablets written in cuneiform. And our pharaoh, our leader that we're looking at, our king, he thought the knowledge was so important that he created a library to
Which
house
I
all of
have
these things.
pictures that are depicted of what it would have looked like in drawings, because of course this thing got destroyed. But so here's one right here. That would have been pretty nice.
Yeah, it's amazing.
And then also here was from after unearthing a lot of it and how tall the ceilings were. And of course, one of the things we will bring up is just within the last couple months, they just made massive discoveries at the same place. That they're actually analyzing the data right now. They still haven't put out what, but you know, a lot of it was in 1849, there was this discovery in Nivena again, and finally really cataloging the tablets and what was on the walls there. But I think it's a really interesting thing because I told Anne, I'm tying this in with, well, what's happening right now that's like this? And actually, I'll just put the story up. But we couldn't believe it because right when we kind of got the synchronistic moment, we looked and I went, you can't. Apple and Trump detail 100 billion U.S. spending expansion, including 2.5 billion for an iPhone glass factory. That in the White House today, the CEO of Apple is saying they're moving all their factories to America. They're going to build the iPhones in America. They're going to make the chips here. They teamed up with Samsung. They teamed up with everything. And then if you think of just in the last 3-4 months, OpenAI and this Stargate, right? $500 billion in Texas as well to build the biggest AI centers. And if you think of where AI is at for training right now, whether it's a library or whether it's your old video you're transcribing or whether it's books or whether it's your old blog site or whatever it is, all the data right now, it doesn't matter if it's a book. People want the digital scanned copies to let AI get in there and ingest all this data. So the new library is these AI centers. The other thing that's not like the headline of this is that another $10 billion Apple's investing in is in the data centers for their data, which I think is interesting that much of the Western world, all of our data, our text messages, our iClouds, and then Samsung's part of all this in the background too. And so it's something like 78% of Americans and people in Europe, you're on an Android or an iPhone.
Right. So
like, this is where all of our data and everything is moving into these centers. They might not look as beautiful as his palace.
Well, it would be nice if they would construct things like that again.
I agree.
We haven't seen what they look like yet.
Well, we do have a little bit. Yeah.
Is if they were using like this Assyrian design, like the Citadel
it's the same astrology though, which is blowing my mind.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking, off of the 5 freeway, the Citadel outlets.
Oh yeah.
It used to be another
way
place.
Out. Yeah, when you're coming back in from Palm Springs and so forth.
But
the ones in LA.
Commerce,
and yeah, okay.
Think, right?
Yeah, when you're off the 5 out of downtown, it's coming south. Yeah.
At some time they built that. It looks kind of Assyrian to me, doesn't it?
It does, yeah.
So wouldn't it be nice if they would build it with Assyrian architecture?
I actually really like Assyrian architecture a lot.
Yeah. I mean, what's amazing is that I've seen so much of it and I feel like I've been there, but that's because I've been at the Louvre. And if anyone's been to the French, big, huge library, you can see how much someone like Napoleon or whoever else brought back from the East and brought it back into Paris, and you can walk around and see it.
Here's what the Stargate facilities...
So that's where it's going to be?
Yeah, and they're already building it right now.
Kind of looks like that kind of complex.
So if I go back to the palace...
Overview?
Like that overview, like... What?
Well, it looks like the same land around it, the deserty looking.
Well, that's what's kind of weird. It's like dry, and I'm sure once they have this facility built, there'll be interesting things on the walls. Like here, I know I'm going a little far, but like, have you noticed how Trump has added all this gold in the White House everywhere? Yeah. It's kind of interesting, especially because he's just made and remade the ties with America and Syria and not have issues with Syria anymore. The actual, right? Like, we weren't friends with Syria forever. And then Trump went over there just months ago and said, we're cool now. With an old ex-Taliban guy who's now in charge. Mm-hmm. So I think it's interesting with that area. And then if you think of like where Iraq is where a lot of these areas are. It's kind of an interesting moment of like, there's so much talk about what's happening there. And also the AI, other data centers are in like Dubai and the UAE, right? United. And there's also so much happening around that area with data centers at the same token. And they're investing money into our data centers, and we're wanting to deal with them too. So it's kind of interesting that there is this, like, you would almost, I'm going to put it this way, now that I've done the astrology of like the Pluto-Uranus trine with Mars now, to look at it differently and to see how rare this is, and that it's connected with astronomical data on tablets, and then the new version of that data, and then the creation of the facility. We're at that interesting moment where it's like very much the same pattern, just this modern version of it. And all the data of the world, including the data of that, is being put into all that. And then the devices in which people use that data, like the number one company in the world of technology, besides NVIDIA right now, is Apple. They're putting everything in, and then they're pulling all their stuff out of Taiwan, which is interesting because I don't know if you can go back to the king himself on his Wikipedia, but if you go into like the wars that he was in, there was so much about him fighting wars in order to kind of pull energy back into the country. There's a lot of similarities there. So he was actually in wars, and then there was questions whether he should be on the throne or not. And it was weird because he used the building of that palace to kind of like, in the military victories, that was part of the palace, how he kept the throne. I'm like, wow, that's really, really interesting.
That's here.
I'm actually fascinated by this.
Ashurbanipal used war loot as a means of stocking his library. Because he was known for being cruel to his enemies, Ashurbanipal was able to use threats to gain materials from Babylonia and surrounding areas. So his intense interest in collecting divination texts was one of his driving motivations. His original motive may have been to gain possession of rituals and incantations that were vital to maintain his royal power. So I know, okay, so by funding this area where we'll be storing all the AI data, I don't think we're necessarily looking for all the divination rituals, blah, blah, blah.
Are you
but
sure?
Definitely. We probably are. But anyway.
I think the fact they called it Stargate, right?
I mean, that's crazy. But I wanted to mention just the whole idea of the way that Trump's been leveraging people to try to get things to come to the U.S., right? So trying to leverage Apple and Samsung to make sure they're investing in the United States, it's kind of that same sort of game that he's not interested necessarily in. It's not overtly that he's going to conquer those areas, but he's still using pressure, wanting to build it here for his own state's power. In a similar way.
It's weird to see that common thread. Also, if I were to think of it from a Babylonia, Mesopotamia standpoint of the original tablets that were of the celestial events, the omens that were written by many different Babylonian astrologers, that's kind of because if you go back in time to that time period, the Chinese are beginning to become very aware. They're beginning. They're not even close to having something. Nobody in the world is close to astronomical data as the Babylonians at that time. China doesn't start getting really good at this stuff until like 800 BC. And then especially in 700 and 600 BC, that's where they're like the ones who actually are the first ones that see Halley's Comet and record it. And then there's other people who do too, but it's like they're the ones who recorded it the most. And then understanding like how to calculate timing and so forth, right? So that's to me the palace of data, because I'll throw in the fun part about that data, and it actually goes to this where I was at. I got to find it again. Right here. Okay, yeah. So some of these things in here on the original one, right? I'm just going to call it the Omen catalog, as the British museums are calling it right now, because the British Museum, because like I think that's a lot easier than me trying to say Unanama Anu Anili.
Yeah.
But here's an example of one thing that would be in there, right? When in the month Azuru, during the evening watch, the moon eclipses, the king will die. The sons of the king will die for the throne of their father, but will not sit on it. Now, what's interesting is like this is actually a text mentioning the comet of Halley, right? So when I looked at this close, I'm like, how in the heck is that writing? But I know it's really old. I mean, it's, this is over 3,000 years old. So they were way ahead of their time. So to me, it's like back then it stored data on a tablet. That's the palace of 1157 BC. And it's with data that nobody else had in tracking the data. So what's kind of interesting to me is that if you look at like that the gods used the planets to show us the future is wrong. The Mesopotamian astronomers used a purely scientific method. They observed the skies, collected data, discovered regularities, and warned the authorities when they knew something bad was about to happen. This is what the Greeks did. This is what even the Roman Senate still had magistrates do. This is what's missing in our society. So I think this is what maybe AI is going to do, is go, once AGI comes, I think that's what's going to happen, is it's going to look and go, this is the one time in life you guys haven't been using all this data from all this historical data that they were all using to make warnings?
Yeah.
And I think that's where this is the game changer beginning, because then the diaries that start in 651 BC, exact, I couldn't believe it. Right? This is where it's a collection of texts from Babylon that is now in the British Museum. And they offer exactly that. A complete diary dealt with 6 months, each divided into 2 halves. So in this one's, it's like, they're actually even showing like the rising and setting of Sirius are also noted. Sometimes a Chaldean who wrote text disarmingly regards clouds were in the sky or I did not watch. So there's even like the data of like too many clouds in the sky, or you know what, I was busy, I didn't watch the sky tonight. It's really like technical. Like, I don't think if I could get 3,000 of my fellow astrologers at UAC that we could all, you know what, we probably all could. But like, that would be, I think, the most like camaraderie like feeling to be with other astrologers. We all watch the skies. We're all recording like, you know what, I couldn't tonight, or I couldn't see it tonight, or I wasn't there. It's like, to me, it's perplexing that we live in a world today where people have a hard time doing much anything. I think to have the patience to do that would be crazy. The other thing too is that they would connect it with the celestial events, with what was the level of the river of Euphrates, the prices of the commodities at the time for barley, dates, mustard, sesame, wool, and then also political events. So like, this is mundane astrology's beginnings of like calculated, and we're gonna predict it. And they use the example in this of during Alexander the Great, when he came across more than any other leader in the world and basically took over most of what the world was. And they predicted in here, and using these techniques and using the old book from 1157 and all those writings, they predicted, also using that there was eclipse energy, and the Greek sources were beginning then really big in 300 BCE. And that in the diary, it starts to, here's a good example. That month, the equivalent of 1 shekel of silver was for barley, kur, mustard, 3 kur. At the end of the month, it was for sesame, 1 pan, and 5 mina. So like, they're helping you understand the value of the money, and then what the celestial events are through the whole month, to see try and connect what's connecting to the value of money. At that time, Jupiter was in Scorpio, Venus was in Leo. At the end of the month, Venus moved to Virgo. So they're helping you know the speeds and where the planets are, because if you're a good astrologer, you already know, okay, at that time, Jupiter was in Scorpio, Venus was in Leo, so Venus is in Virgo, Saturn was in Pisces. They're showing a Venus opposite Saturn. Mercury and Mars, which had set, were not visible. But they're building the case for you to do that astrology in your head and go, oh, Venus is full speed, or Mars is full speed, or Venus maybe is retrograde right now. I'd have to see the other planets, but you know, it's like, oh, wow. So then they go, here's another one. That month, the river level was Lacuna, which I'm sure, I don't know what that is, but I'm sure if I knew what it was, if it was high or low. On the 11th of that month, panic occurred in the camp before the king, the Macedonians' encampment in front of the king. So the king is Alexander the Great. On the 24th, 1st of October in the morning, the king of the world, Alexander, erected his standard and attacked. Opposite each other they fought, and a heavy defeat of the troops of the king of Darius, who was a famous ruler of that area of that time, who was defeated. Alexander the Great made his way to the east all the way, right? The king Darius's troops deserted him, and to their cities they went. They fled to the east. So, but they were not surprised by the outcome of this battle. After all, the significance of the eclipse was described in the I guess I'll say it again, the Enuma Anili, right? So they say on either the 13th or 14th, Elulu, the moon is dark. So the moon is in its balsamic phase. The watch passes and it is dark. His features are dark like lapis lazuli. And this is also the eclipse. So it's a balsamic moon coming into eclipse. The west quadrant is covered. The west wind blew. The sky dark. The light is covered. Then this is where it gets kind of creepy. Like the son of the king will become purified for the throne, but will not take the throne. An intruder will come with princes of the west. For 8 years, he will exercise kingship, which is Alexander the Great. He will conquer the enemy army. There will be an abundance and riches on his path. He will continually pursue his enemies and his luck will not run out, which it didn't. But then they also, if you go deeper into it, did predict that the king of the world will die, and how that they knew and that they used all of the writings from that book and the astrology predicted when Alexander the Great would come in and die. Mm-hmm. And that he wouldn't leave an heir to take over the whole empire that was all under his reign. And that's actually where the world really splits apart, I think, is Alexander the Great. Because you can take over so much of the world and then you're the king, and then when you die and nobody knows what part of the world you're in, there's not communication like today. Mm-hmm. That's where you just start seeing people take over and like, oh, I guess I'm a ruler here now, you know?
Right.
So I think that's what's really significant is that, you know, of course, we're not in the time of Alexander the Great, the astrology of that, but we are in the time of the data, the information, and then, of course, it's the astrological information, which to me is like the golden information, those tablets, and it works. And then, of course, it ending up in that palace, which at that same time is being talked about to be, and actually there was beginnings of it. I have in a book here, like they were having written tablets about building it, what it was going to look like, the rooms and what that they were going to do. And it was going to be a symbol for peace and prosperity. It's very interesting how much people kind of have a negative understanding of Babylon. Like it's always like
I think
the worst thing in the
Bible.
Of course, right.
But you have to wonder. One of these things when I was looking at the history of the library.
I have that one too.
It talks about when it was destroyed and the number of people here. Nineveh was destroyed in 612 BCE, not just the library, right? By a coalition of Babylonians, Scythians, and Medes, and ancient Iranian people. It's believed that during the burning of the palace, a great fire must have ravaged the library, causing the clay cuneiform tablets to become partially baked. And it's actually, what's so funny is that they're trying to destroy the power of that civilization, but in the process of baking those tablets, that's why they're still preserved to this day. I was watching a video earlier.
So they needed to get charred up.
Yeah. So it's interesting that's why we've got this information. That's one of the reasons. But the other is that, so I was thinking that it's this whole coalition of people that come together to try to destroy all that information, because that's what was giving the power to this ruler, right? That's one of the things you would see that is causing him to have so much power, that he's got all of this astrological knowledge and all of the omen knowledge and all of the divinations and rituals and all of that stuff. But what
it's almost like about 30 years after it's made. So 612 BC, 646, it's like complete. It doesn't last too long, but that reminds me of like 30 years from now, Texans, they don't have jobs, AI's taking over, has all the info and the people, and them going to torch the AI facility.
Oh, that's what I'm wondering.
Right.
So we'll have to put a book note in that or bookmark on that. But the other thing that I was thinking of is that one of the reasons this is possible at this time is cuneiform was one of the earliest types of writing that was created. And so they've got, by this time, a whole bunch of scribes that can copy it all. So not only do you have the astrologers going and collecting all the data and everybody working to do that, you've got all the people who are writing it in this uniform way. And I don't think it's the same, because cuneiform goes back thousands of years, I think, before that.
Right.
But I keep thinking for AI, I was mentioning this earlier, that there has to be something about it, because at some point cuneiform went away, nobody used it anymore, and it became an ancient language. And people had to then start to learn how to read it again when these kinds of tablets would be discovered by people who didn't use it anymore.
Right.
So at some point in the future, AI, like whatever's being collected today in that kind of a center for AI, is going to be in a type of language that will die eventually, that people won't use anymore. It'll fall out of use, but it will still have the information to future societies. Does that make sense? Right?
Yeah, so it reminds me of math today and coding.
Right.
Right? So like computers, the first supercomputer actually the Nazis built in the 40s, believe it or not.
Yeah,
right?
we talked about that before.
And then the math for that is astounding, the equations that have to be done. And we live in a world today where the way that I'll just put on my screen, like the way that hieroglyphics and pictographs language is like popular with the people. I don't want to know the scribes and how to decode them. I just want, show me it. And if you look at today, everybody, I mean, even with Grok releasing their new imagery thing or whatever, it's Imagine, or ChatGPT with images, or people online and they're looking at Instagram and video and images, like nobody wants to see the code in the background. Nobody wants to see, and even how AI is doing the coding now, and like you can choose to have the AI terminal that it pops up itself now, like in the background and not seen. And just be like, oh, I just want to see like the nice little thing, and just give me the thing. Like to me, it's like that's what's happening right now. Is there's two different languages. There's people decoding old code. Most people, when they think of a terminal, they think of back in the 90s on MS-DOS or your first Apple IIe and putting a disk in, a start disk, and then having to put in run and all that stuff, right? Like that's how I grew up. So like terminals to me are normal, but for most people, they're terrified. But to get in the AI world, you have to be using terminals, right? And that's what's interesting, is that there's a split now where people are they're speaking in emojis. They're in that version, while there's all these people in the background to get this librarian to make it. The things of value are the coding. Or like 2 weeks ago, Meta bought all these OpenAI developers for $100 million. One guy got offered almost $1 billion and turned it down. He's just a coder. I shouldn't say he's just a coder. I mean, the guy's done some crazy stuff. But he turned it down from Meta. It was like $600 million to code.
Wow.
So people right now, I think it's so interesting. They want like the front end version of things, but the people doing the back end are what are making the value of those centers, is what I mean. Is like the tablets are what make it worthy, not the palace itself.
But this, again, this imagery that you showed,
oops,
sorry, I was looking at yours.
Fine.
That imagery.
Because that's actually the king with his queen in the garden. She's and their kids, right? So they're in the garden and he's laying down and she's there, which reminds me of what the Greeks in the image of Mars and Venus with their kids laying down that Botticelli painted.
Yeah. But it's meant to have all that imagery. What I wanted to say is that level of art or representation is being created by the king to be able to to support his power. That's propaganda. So the real power is in that. And I mean, would continue to be those sorts of ideas, continue to be presenting certain ideas about rulership or whatever mythology is important for society, whatever. So today we still have this. So there would be some version of the state or whoever it is that has the power in society wanting to create this stuff that conveys ideas about who has control in certain ways. But the real information or the other stuff that's happening on a different level behind the scenes would be like the ancient world's coders in there with their cuneiform tablets,
right,
using their little sticks to make the writing in the clay tablets. So, here's that idea of a split world is really interesting.
Even here's a depiction that was in that palace. It was done in 645 through 640 BC of a lion and a lioness in the garden. So that was interesting that the palace was set as a garden as well, which this is also ironic because it is kind of like we did do the astrology of like 903 BC, which is one of the other dates. And that's when there's a Jewish ruler who kills, and it's in the Bible, who kills the other ruler at the same time. And it's pretty gory. Like, I can't even believe, like, some of these Israelites back then were not the nicest people. And I was like tripping because I was like, God, is this Netanyahu back in the day? Dare I say that? But, it's like, it's crazy because I just think, like Garden of Eden, right? Like, all these, are they all talking or are they all taking info? Like all of Greek astrology and Roman astrology and Western astrology, this is where the Bible gets so creepy about astrology. It's because it connects to Babylon. It connects to Mesopotamian and Babylon and those ancient civilizations. It all comes from there. But all of the depictions of in the Garden of Eden come from there, is my point. So all of it, it really is one of those things to where it's like we pick and choose what we want you to like and not like. I think the best example is, right here, the way the king and his queen, and then they have their kids, and then I just love using Botticelli's Mars Venus. I mean, that's the same thing.
Yeah, when was this one created? That's
in 1485.
1485.
That's one of Botticelli's more earlier ones, yeah.
Well, see, I don't even know if I'll be able to get this out, like what I'm thinking. But to me, this is a different period of time when this art's being created for wealthy bankers and middle-class people who are financing the Renaissance in Italy.
In the early parts of it, 1480s, yeah.
And
he's also, Botticelli is also, of course, I mean, he's famous for a lot of things, but he's very famous for depicting the virgin birth, but with the three magi. He's one of the ones that did, like, I love all of Botticelli is my favorite artist. But, and of course, Botticelli's Venus, right? Like that's probably his most famous is the Birth of Venus, right? Mm-hmm. But it's kind of interesting because you're right. He was a little different that he wants to do things for the church. So of course he does. Get out of Venus for a sec. He wants to do stuff because before he was in Rome, that's the thing, and he's dealing with the Medicis personally. So he's like their personal, like, hired artist for a lot of their stuff. So here's Madonna and Child with St. John the Baptist, right? So some of his earlier work, this is at the Louvre in Paris, but this was 1470. And he does do this, the Adoration of the Magi, which to me, I appreciate it as an astrologer because you can see that the astrologers matter in this. A lot of the church paintings are only about the virgin birth. What they show is the magi around her, the Trinity around her. That's another way to look at it. But you can see also, if you get really close in this painting, see this, like the golden rays coming down onto Jesus and the halo around his head, but that Jesus is with one of the magi here. There's a magi right here over her shoulder looking after her as well. That these magi understood and also were the ones that clarified that that this is the king, that this is the chosen soul. So I think that there's, I don't know, we went a little tangenty, but it's like, it is interesting though that he is maybe subconsciously not knowing it, but like you look at that old Assyrian tablet of like the king and his queen laying there, or I look at old Egyptian hieroglyphics, because there were some really powerful Egyptian pharaohs during that period, and their depictions as well of like them as the pharaoh. There's always the feminine in there as well. And so if you kind of think about a lot of this stuff, like there's the communication. I'm so glad you brought that up about the scribes and how they're this old form of writing, and how to decode that is kind of how probably 1,000 years from now, how are they going to decode? You said this to me earlier, like how are they going to go on our computers if they find one and understand that this is a file for this or that or what we do?
Yeah.
You know?
And you said, well, they'll have AI, or, AI will
have changed the way that it looks. Yeah.
But I still feel like I said, but there's something about AI still that if we look in the future will be an early form of something else.
Right.
Right. A really early form. But, as you were talking about that and Botticelli, because, you thought of Botticelli because there's a lot in that picture that has the same kind of symbolism in the way the bodies are laying and the like power dynamic between the wife and the king, right? That was a king in that picture.
That's actually his favorite work to do, was the lies about marriage that the church had created. That's what's so ironic about him.
Is that picture behind the monitor over there, is that Botticelli also, or no?
Oh yeah, that's the one I'm talking.
The one of the marriage
banquet?
One,
yeah, that's the one that shows that people at a wedding aren't there for your love. They're there for their own social needs, and then also the family lines, and it's more about the family lines coming together and the arrangement than the love. The only two people in the painting. It's not on Wikipedia. That's what's so crazy, because it was a private painting that he did. I think it's called The Wedding Banquet, I think. And that one I paid a lot of money to get done. The marriage feast. Yeah. Well, that's not a clear enough picture. There's got to be a...
You just grab it off the wall and bring it over here.
Well, I mean, that's what's hard, is like they don't have... here we go. So that's the wife right here, okay? Everybody's looking in a different direction. She's looking at her husband right there in the middle with the bald head. But
it's all about the society and connections.
Correct. But above on how you see to the left the feminine and the right the masculine, and then you see the middle is there is no water. It's that's what's crazy, is like there is no emotion that's bringing this empty well together that should be full of water, or the way that these arches work in old Greek and Roman, right? Like there should be water, and they understand. It's very deep. This is like what he really thought about it all.
Well, I mean, at the time that was done, I don't know why we're talking about the Renaissance, but I'm very happy about that.
Right.
But at the time when that painting was done, you're really talking about these new families in Florence and elsewhere in those Italian city-states who have money and they're newly powerful. So they're using all the symbolism of power to cement that or to bring people together. But right there, you're showing how important marriage was to the families in making sure that they maintain their power. So it isn't about love.
Correct.
Which is interesting because he's working at the same time as
Leonardo da Vinci.
Well, no, not just Leonardo da Vinci, but I'm talking about like the Decameron. Boccaccio wrote that, and that was all about individuals and this group of young people coming together, and it was more about love. They were sort of rebelling against that structure. So I feel like in painting that, he has to be making a commentary on it too, right? That he probably wasn't advocating for loveless marriages. He's just showing that it's about, I don't know, maybe art historians out there will know more, but it seems to me like it's making a comment on it as well.
It is. No, I've done all the research because Da Vinci at the time is doing the same thing. Not maybe about love, right? Botticelli's doing it with the Adoration of the Magi. Da Vinci, of course, does the Annunciation image as a training for his backgrounds, which is one of the most beautiful paintings ever. That's the other one that sits right there above my thing with Gabriel, and the only one where Gabriel's not over on top of the Virgin Mary, like forcing her to have the child,
right?
But doing the proper masculine and feminine accepting. So actually, that's where Da Vinci does it. And that's what inspires Botticelli to do something to show that it's not about the show, the pompous. And if you think of Italy, like all these brand names that come out of there, it comes from then.
Yeah. All the craftsmanship
all of it,
and everything was then.
Like,
but the interesting thing would be, because I always feel like when we look at the different times in history, right now we're not saying, oh, we're going to go back to the time of this Assyrian leader and he's going to collect all the knowledge and we're all going to have no voice or whatever.
I mean, that's
interesting.
I hate to say it, but I would counter and say America at this moment, that this just now is official with Apple. It's the tech giant of the world, number one. Its problem has been that it's been making all of its chips and all of these products in Taiwan. This is where the chips are made. And now China. So I think that I told you this, that I think this is the soft way that the American public isn't hearing the truth, because the media is saying, because Trump's threatening tariffs. The threatening tariffs is kind of a warning sign for those that don't get the info at the top, like, get the fuck out of here now and come back home, because we're not going to go into a massive war with China over Taiwan. So the writing's on the wall, and that's the bigger picture here. But I would say that at this moment, think of Europe. They don't have any tech. They don't have any companies that are in control of computers or anything. They don't have tech. They don't have it. So that's what's they're going to have to come to America now. Now, if they want anything, they're going to have to either choose America or China, and China is behind, but can advance more. But this is, I think, where the deals are being made. Like, China's like, we'll let you get out and we'll take over Taiwan once you're like, give us the green light. And then we can now flourish and do our own thing. And I think that it like Europe will have a big choice of like, do we go with the Chinese and Huawei or Huawei, these companies that are trying, and they've been knocking off American stuff for a long time. NVIDIA just finally made it to where they can let China buy the GPUs that are only meant for the Western world, because it's kind of dumb. It's just like, if they have something good, like, at least we control the hardware that they would need, like how it's done. But I think that's where I would debate to say that America now has just made the chess move of, you want a tech anything, it's all made in America now. The chips, the AI, you want access? I mean, it's kind of putting Europe in the dark.
Yeah, but it's also like Ashurbanipal's library, right? Trump's going around and collecting all the things and putting it into the center and eventually making us also a target for people who want it.
Right.
So whether, I don't think they'll come attack, but I mean, it's going to be a target for all sorts of whatever foreign attempts to destroy whatever it is there, I would think. But also, what was I going to say about
I mean,
this?
I want to add to that what you said, and you think Elon Musk with Starlink, I mean, so when it comes to internet, satellite, like he chooses whether or not he wants to help Ukraine out with internet or not. The internet, the cables that go under the Atlantic to connect the world together. If you were to disconnect America, we could be fine because we have everything here. And we could run our internet and be like, woo, we wouldn't be connected to the world, but we could use our satellites and use Starlink and find a ways around it. Everywhere else wouldn't. They'd be in the dark. And to me, that whole darkness is no information. So that's where it kind of is an interesting moment where I think the problem with Europe is because it's tried to form a European Union, but they just conceded to America over a trade deal, right? And so they took off the things they were going to do to us because I think they see the writing on the wall. So that's what's weird is a week prior to this is the EU letting Trump come there and say, you guys won, we're conceding, and you make the deal. So it's very much, I would say, the same astrology as we have it all. You're going to have to come through us. Now, does that last long? I don't think so. You know?
It doesn't last long, but it leaves such a legacy, right? I mean, it, as you said, so this location was holding that omen book, right? That then went on to make these predictions about Alexander the Great. Right. And also another thing that I noticed that was in this library was the Epic of Gilgamesh. Have you ever heard of that work? I just put it into ChatGPT to try to get a really quick summary of it. And I've used excerpts from the Epic of Gilgamesh to teach in world history. And one of the things that it's often used for is to show how this is the story of a flood that happened before, this was written before the stories in the Old Testament about the Great Flood, right? So, like, this is just saying that it's in the Epic of Gilgamesh. I can't do these names either. Utnapishtim is warned by the god Ea of a catastrophic flood. He builds a boat, takes animals aboard, and survives the deluge. Afterward, he releases birds to find the land and offers sacrifices to the gods. Same as in Genesis, right?
Yeah, because the Noah story is done through all the old civilizations with a great flood and the whole same story.
And then there's the themes of mortality and immortality. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, Gilgamesh grapples with the death of his friend Enkidu and undertakes a quest for immortality. Ultimately, he learns he must accept human mortality. In the Bible, it's Adam and Eve's expulsion from Eden, and that this idea that humans lose access to immortality and must accept mortality. And there's more of these things that are the same in both of those. So the thing that's interesting to me is that there's data in this library that resurfaces and becomes meaningful again in different contexts. And so that's something that's interesting that I'm thinking about as you're talking about it. Another thing it was really interesting you brought up Botticelli, and I'm sure we're going to figure out why that came up at some point. But to me, that makes me start to think about who has the power now, and how you have some of these same structures and forms that existed in this era of Assyrian kings, that then by the time we get to the Medici, they want to emulate that kind of power. And even when you look at some of their buildings in Florence, they, like I remember seeing the Medici, the Medici coat of arms on all of the buildings. The way it's carved into the stone is very much like the Assyrian look as well, like how those big buildings are built in that overview that we looked at. It looks very similar in some of the government buildings, or the Medici buildings in Florence.
Right.
They look very similar to that. And so, but the difference in Florence was that now you have this group of men who weren't born into the power, who now have the power. And I feel like that's kind of where we are now too.
Yeah, kind of like the name of the town in Texas where Stargate is, and this is what they're depicting the look of the building, which is a lot.
No, is that it? Is that what the building?
This is straight from Blue Collar Commercial Real Estate Group in Texas, in Abilene. Do you know where Abilene, in the ancient city of Abilene, was?
No, I only know where Abilene, Texas and
Abilene
Kansas
in
are.
ancient was part of Syria.
Oh. But then where is that in location? Because we're looking, this library would have been in modern Iraq, but.
Right. But I think it's interesting because
it's very close. Yeah.
Mesopotamia, it sits on the outskirts. And if you actually read more about that king, Ashurbanipal, right? That he was dealing with things on the outskirts of the region that he was at a lot.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. He had that war that was happening off in one side.
Correct. And that's where in Syria, and it's all connected. The ancient Abilene is the name of the city. There's also in Texas and Nineveh, Texas, correct.
Where is that? I wonder what they're building there.
It's a small historic settlement in Leon County, located within the boundaries of the Russell Flow community. It was established in the 1800s, named after the biblical city of Nineveh, reflecting the Christian values of early. It's so funny. The Christian, to me, is like, I don't think a lot of them get it. I'm
looking at Nineveh. I'm on the Google map.
I guess Davy Crockett went through, or Buffalo. Yeah, it was part of the stagecoach route from Buffalo to Crockett, and then there was notorious fistfights, gunfights, and quarrels there, especially between members of the Democratic Party and the Populist Party, the People's Party, back in the late 1800s. Oh, and it was a population of 50 with a cotton gin and a general store. By 25, the population had grown to a high of 150. I don't think a lot of people wanted to be there. And the population was still reported at 101 in 2000. But I think it's interesting if we look on a map and we kind of like look at Nineveh here. I'm thinking of like the eclipses that went through. So it's sitting in more eastern Texas. So it's outside of Waco. It's north of Austin. It's south of Dallas. That means, because I was in Austin, that was that's right. I remember Nineveh was in the path of the eclipse.
I do remember you
it's
saying
part
that.
of the eclipse path in the
pointed it out because of the name.
And where all of the like this data center and everything is all outside Austin, Texas. So
it's in Abilene, Texas is where it all is?
Yeah, but a lot, and so outside of Austin, like that's all these cities all around here. This is where like Tesla's at. So like when you go to like Bastrop, where I just did the event last year with Team Light, like a lot of these areas right here, a lot of people from Tesla live because the Tesla stuff is all out here, right? And like the Say's Sayersville is like another thing that it was brought up in today's thing. And this was all where the eclipse was too. So it is kind of interesting though, the old ancient names, not the Christian version. It's Christian because it comes to your Christian Bible, but like it's about
it's interesting
people.
that people would call a town Nineveh.
I know.
But
it's really not it's about Old Testament stuff, and it's always like if they were to maybe do the history of the area and the people, it's not the way it's depicted because the Bible's depicting it from very much Council Nicene viewpoints and people who channeled it because a book stayed on a table and the other books didn't.
Yeah. Well, that's the way God wanted it. But people in the chat, I keep seeing this earthquake in New Jersey thing, so I had to look it up. I mean, yes, we've been having earthquakes and things like that around the world. But the one the earthquake in New Jersey was 2.7. I mean, what was that? That was like a big
you know what?
Garbage truck going by.
That reality show, 1,000-Pound Sisters, when they start jumping, that's a 2.4. So.
Yep. But anyway, us Californians, like we know an earthquake.
I know, yeah. A 3.0 is a normal day.
I know. And we're laughing.
I know.
Come on.
Well, it really is nothing. It doesn't do much. Yeah, it doesn't do anything.
Yeah. But I've been in DC when there's been an earthquake before. And I was just waking up and I was like, starting to feel like California here. But it was really small. But it is weird. Like the odd thing is when you do get earthquakes in places that you don't expect them.
Right.
So.
They do happen up there, though. There's a lot of granite, though, and the rock all in that area. That's why Manhattan's built so tall and on an island, is because it's granite.
I would not want to be in Manhattan if there was a earthquake, a big one, though.
No, it'd be fine. It's not soil like down there. It's granite.
Yeah. I mean, you wouldn't want to be in LA either if there's the big one because
I'd rather be in New York.
Yeah, we will sink into the sand. That's how LA.
My ninth great grandfather started Wall Street, so as a trader, as a pilgrim, right? So,
isn't he buried in Trinity Church or no? Did I make that up?
No, but he started Wall Street by trading with the Native Americans at Wall Street today, where it's at in New York after leaving Plymouth Rock, so.
Well, I recently found out my ancestors, some of them were actually in the Revolution and all of that. Also.
Oh, very nice.
The Poes, and I told you about that. So
yeah.
I am related to Edgar Allan Poe, but as a uncle, whatever that would be, like great uncle.
That's better. He was a little odd.
Yeah.
He liked absinthe and died during illegal voting.
Poor guy. Yeah, he was the victim of
voter fraud.
Or that's a theory. We need to talk about some of those things again. What?
So I actually was going to go to that earthquake because now I want to kind of bridge this with one. This is such a weird new time because one, we haven't seen Mars, Pluto, Uranus make a grand trine in air from these signs for 2,600 years. Two, we now have an object that it's interstellar and it's not a comet now as of yesterday. So we don't know what it's going to be. And that throws a lot of big questions because, so Ann and I were going to really kind of stay with that at first and maybe do a show about that and look at the ancient ways of how they looked at comets and how, whether it was different time periods in different places in the world, whether it was the Chinese or whether it was Western or whether it was people that were in India, or how did they look at comets? And, I would say the common thread would be an omen, which is ironic because, of course, it led to the original book that starts the omens from the Babylonians. But I would say that it's always about a king, end time is a common thread. But I thought I would read you, and there's so much in here, but I want to read what Nostradamus actually wrote about it, because he has a quatrain about a comet. And I think it's really interesting because you guys are bringing up the earthquake in New Jersey. So let me see where it is. Mandate from that's Chinese. That's the Imperial Astrologers of Comet Atlas. So there was a Comet Atlas way back in the day, which is kind of weird. 300 to 200 BC, Comet Atlas. And how about we'll start there with the Chinese? That the text can 29 distinct comet drawings, each accompanied by a short divinatory caption. For instance, one comet with a long broom-like tail carried the note 3-year drought. Another shaped was annotated coming of the plague. Another death of the prince. Yet another comet diagram just forked into 4 prongs resembling a swastika, labeled a long-tailed pheasant star, said to presage epidemics of war and pestilence. The very existence of this atlas, likely used as a reference by court astrologers, shows how Chinese astrology systematically connected comet morphology into specific outcomes. It was believed that heaven displayed these heavenly signs as direct messages about the state and dynasty. So there's always a lot of that because, of course, court astrologers are working for their king. Oh, here's Nostradamus. And here's one of his quatrains about a time period. During this time when the hairy star is apparent, the 3 great princes shall be made enemies. Struck from heaven, peace is undone, earth shaking, Arn and Tiber rivers full of surges. It's crazy that he's using some of the oldest Babylonian astrology about rivers and floods and times. It's not biblical. It's prior to the Bible. That's what the Babylonian omens prove, is that they were the ones who came up with this transit's happening and the river is up or down or whatever.
Yeah, you could really see that they were really cataloging all that information.
Correct. So not the Christians. They're picture people.
Are they?
Yeah, they're not.
They're not prophets.
They're not doing any of that work.
Well, no, I mean, they were being discouraged from it because obviously it's connected with these old civilizations that they would have seen as pagan, or they would have been told they were pagan.
But it's ironic because they look at the great floods or something as if like it's a bad thing. Well, the idea of it being a bad thing is an omen from Babylonian astrologers, not because of God's individual just version without using any of that. Like there's God connected to it, but it's not, you know what I mean? Like it's like they're not telling everybody. Actually, these Babylonian astrologers who came up with this, predicted this king's fall, predicted that. And so when you read all that in the Old Testament, it's like, that's where it comes from, but they don't want to tell you that it's that.
No, and you know what's also weird is I wonder how it ever became that in order to have faith, you have to believe something literally. Because
right.
and I remember always thinking that when I was a kid, if they taught Noah's Ark, right?
Right.
And you think, we're really supposed to believe this ark had every creature from all around the world. You
right.
know, they're all there. Everything that's alive now was there. And, you know, maybe that did happen. But why would it destroy your faith to not see that symbolically? Because also, if you think about what water meant in that region, right? And how important it was for life. But then the idea also that if the world is acting up or things get too out of control, water can come as a purifying element. I mean, just thinking of it as an element. And you could think symbolically of water. Like, did it literally have to happen?
Right.
Or no? People can get the message. Maybe you shouldn't push things this far. Don't be horrible people to each other. And then God doesn't have to punish you. But the idea of God's punishing us instead of maybe it's about renewal.
Right. But I also think it's also this idea of struck from heaven, like that Nostradamus uses, is like, Nostradamus also liked to say in his teachings, in his preface, like, because these people just don't get it, it's all astrology, but it's like, right? So the men of letters, like these people, like, so it's like, instead of how is it struck from heaven? Okay, God's doing this, the planets are in this position, it's creating this moment where this river happens. It's predicted because of so many astrologers looking at so many things, or this star rising, and that's the moment that it struck. Instead of, like, I think it's too quick and too cartoony. I'll call it cartoony. It's like the idea that God's up above and I'm striking from heaven right now, and here it's all like here. It's like it's kind of missing all the there's a lot of points to get to that place, and it's predictable too. Predictable. The idea is that God's unpredictable.
Well, speaking of that, then, all these ancient people, what would they look at something like this current atlas thing that's
the interesting point. So, like, then there's, of course, I'll stick with the plagues and panic, which is one thing I definitely said. So medieval people often link comets with pestilence. Like, we need to be better people now. We need to get back into our, well, they wouldn't study the Bible back then.
Right.
They would need to go to church and have the priest help them and confess. But claiming that the comet poisoned the air. So that's what's so weird is, remember in 2020, I was telling people that this whole idea of coronavirus is not from a lab or anything, but it's from space. And back then, people were blaming the comet for the Black Death. Sometimes led communities to turn to prayer, penitence, or scapegoating in hoping of cleansing comet-tainted air. And then fast forward to 1665 through 66, a comet in late 1664 through 65 was widely seen in England and believed to foreshadow the Great Plague of London and the Great Fire of London, which you've done a lot. You teach about that a lot. The famous dearest Samuel Pepys wrote...
Samuel Pepys.
Oh, Pepys?
One of those names that doesn't sound like it looks.
Wrote that the comet hath been looked upon by all Europe to be ominous regarding those tragedies. Or if you go to, like, of course, Halley's Comet in 1066, the Norman invasion happens in 1066. The medieval and Renaissance European astrologers, of course, used it always with wars, plague, catastrophes, and deaths of kings, which they're taking, I think, a lot of that from Babylonian, because that's 2,000 years prior that they already had predicted. You know what I mean? The Julius Caesar's comet in 44 BC in July proclaimed that the hairy star, so that's exactly the same star and comet that is what Nostradamus is saying, the hairy star, was the soul of Caesar admitted among the immortal gods. The common people supposed the star indicated that the soul of Caesar was received among the gods. Privately, Octavian rejoiced at the auspicious omen, interpreting it as it produced for himself. So, like, there's a lot of different ways to look at it. Manilius, my favorite astrologer of that time period, in his Astronomica book, described comets as alarming omens bringing great changes. He cataloged disasters they would herald, from failed harvests and plagues to wars and insurrections. And the actual word disaster in Latin, disaster is evil star. So what's weird is there's a lot of negative. The Chinese look at it as positive for their dynasty. The most interesting people, I think, that look at any of the phenomenons in the sky, of course, are the Mesopotamians, because they're the ones who were the ones who created the first writings of it and tracking it. But they called them heavenly beards, reflecting their brush-like tails. And then comets as erratic-tailed stars were typically dire portents. They were associated with death of rulers, outbreaks of war, and other calamities. That's where it starts, Babylon's depiction of it. The most interesting, though, is, in my opinion, like if you actually do go to some other Islamic astrologers, and so Wohlcke, his stuff is used today. I mean, if you go look up your lunar mansions, if you go look up Fadaria, if you go look up a lot of Arabic astrology that's mixed in Western astrology, it's through him. So I think he's one of the best astrologers as well. Like I have my favorite in time periods, like Manilius, just for his way of using it as poetry. I think that during the Islamic period of astrology that held the whole world together of astrology, because the West wasn't doing it, and people in the East were not as much either, like in China, that it was really like blossomed in Islam. But a comet in Capricorn means war between kings and many misfortunes in the West. As for the ruling, the one that's ruling there, dreadful clamor in Persia, and towards the south, a multitude of robbers. It signifies a decline of religious and good people, death, excessive hail and snow, of destroying crops. If the comet appears in the east, it brings obstacles for kings from their enemies, causing death for them, and renewal among the eminent of the realm, with many snows and rains. In the west, it foretells abundant grass and plentiful water. So like, his is the stuff that really is more about the framework of mundane astrology, predicting world events with a high degree of specificity. And actually, he was obsessed with specificity, especially your Arabic parts, and are through him. Okay. Then the other one is India. So they call comets in the old script, their old Sanskrits, and that Ketu, because actually Rahu Ketu, the demon, is said to have been like a comet-like demon that was cut in half and then becomes the lunar nodes. But comets are considered Ketus, right? And so they looked at it as a fire in the sky with a tail. So we always call Ketu the tail, right? So if it's really white and it's coming in the north, then it's good for the people, all right? But like Rahu and Ketu are the ascending and descending lunar nodes, but their myth involves a tale of a comet-like demon that's cut in half, right? So the head of the Rahu doesn't have a tail. It's the head without the tail. And then the tail, of course, is the Ketus. But in the Indian, like their prophecy works, the Ketu comets that appear bright like the moon, they think they're like children of the moon, which is kind of an interesting way to look at it. So they're benevolent. The moon sons. They appear in the north. When they appear, mankind will be happy. If it's white, lustrous comets, he calls them the moon's sons, and that they are beneficent. A single comet possessing 3 tails and 3 colors are called the Brahma Danda, the rod of Brahma, born under the Creator. It appears anywhere. If it ever appears anywhere, when it appears, the world will come to an end. That's the doomsday comet of theirs. There was one where had that did have pretty close to 3 different tails, and here we go. In 1615, a comet with 3 tails appeared over South Asia. In Sri Lanka, as a chronicler described, the triple-tailed comet terrified the populace. A fiery comet with 3 tails appeared, filling the country with fear and dismay. Soon after, a devastating epidemic struck. Fish in the rivers died, polluting the air. And on April 14th, 1615, a massive earthquake leveled buildings in Colombo with volcanic fumes and fires reported. To the people, it truly felt like the end of the world, and the comet had seemingly announced it. Later, astrologers seized on the event as confirmation of the Vahamihira's ancient warning about the 3-tailed Brahmadanda comet bringing global destruction. While the world didn't literally end, for those in Sri Lanka that terrible night, it seemed like the apocalypse. So it definitely could be translated incorrectly, like the end of the world. Like it could be just like the end of that environment that it's appearing over, right? Yeah. So this is where I'm going to go with what we've just found out in the last day and what Avi Loeb just said. And I thought this was really interesting. Because it doesn't have a tail. There's also been, of course, comets without tails before. I'll do the Daily Mail one that just was there because it's easy to use. The Daily Mail uses the mysterious interstellar object aiming at Earth not natural as scientists rule out the comet theory. So, of course, 200 of the researchers over this thought it was a comet. But at the beginning, Avi Loeb had raised doubts. In his preprint stuff, he had also raised doubts. Like, I don't think this thing's a comet. And then, boom, it just got proved to him yesterday. There is no tail, and there were claims of a tail. But it's accelerating, and it's going 60 miles a second, 130,000 miles an hour. It's like... right? But he also questioned the object's unusual lack of gas emissions and its precise retrograde trajectory, which aligns suspiciously well with the inner solar system. So now he has given it a 6 out of 10 that in his ranking system, that is, it is artificial, an alien. So it's gone up to 60% now.
Interesting.
He also has claimed that he believes that the reason why it's going to pass closest to the sun with Earth on the other side is it's going to use the gravitational energy of the sun to be able to stop and to throw probes out towards Earth and seed the planets with probes, like Mars and Venus and then Earth too. But this is where I thought it was the most interesting. So here's showing there is no tail. This came out yesterday. But while the reddening may suggest dust, it could also mean the object simply has a naturally red surface, much like D-type asteroids or in any ancient space rocks. Continued monitoring around when it gets closer to the sun is necessary to track changes in activity and color. So Avi Loeb also had authored 4 scientific papers on 3i Atlas and recently proposed using NASA's Juno spacecraft to intercept the object near Jupiter in 2026, which they're actually just put into Congress to do.
Wow.
Right? The other thing is that, so yeah, it's doing 60 miles per second relative to Earth, but this is right here. If the hypothesis that 3i Atlas is a technological artifact proves correct, there are 2 possible implications. Either its intentions are entirely benign or they are malign. In the first case, humanity needs only to wait and welcome this interstellar messenger with open arms. It is the second scenario that causes serious concern. He added that because the second possibility had serious consequences, we can use the idea behind Pascal's wager. Blaise Pascal argued that it's smarter to believe in God because the possible benefits of believing are much greater than the losses if you are wrong. Similarity in our case, it makes sense to warn humanity about the risks from 3i Atlas, even if it turns out to be just a theory. The cost of not warning could be much worse than the cost of being wrong. What gets me about this is like, this is not, and it was weird because I was looking at stories every day, and I have a couple agents, AI, running on stories every day. And today, the big story for me was that the planetary society, this is the same society and these same eclipses were in, denounced Pluto. Okay? And they did a podcast today, and they brought on a chief scientist, and they brought on another research scientist. And even they are like, I never thought this would happen in our lifetime. They show that there has been this system they've been trying to create of a comet interceptor that they want to have out there for an interstellar comet if it were to come. We're not there yet, though. So that's what it would like kind of look like. This is, of course, the artist's impression of Oumuamua, which defied gravity. This is defying gravity as well. And comets defy gravity. But this is different because this is like we don't know what it is now.
Yeah. Interesting. Isn't it? I mean, it's almost like we're up leveling into something even crazier. So it's not just a comet. If we were in 1200 in Europe and a comet comes over, we are thinking, how can this be? It's going through the crystalline spheres. It's not predictable. What is going on? Right? It's shocking in that way because it upsets what people believe, how the universe or how everything works, right? And for us now, we're worried about, it's gone beyond what we know now, what we think is scientifically possible.
Correct.
So we have to come up with theories that are just as harebrained or whatever it would be, even if it's based in science, and there's a lot of scientists talking about it. We're having to come up with some explanation for something we don't understand because our current explanation system doesn't allow us to explain what it is. So to me, that's the fascinating part, is that we are as much in the dark as medieval peasants.
Right.
You know, when we really come down to it. Not that there's anything wrong with that, and that might have been a nicer life, but yeah, we are stuck asking the same questions. And when he brought up Blaise Pascal, which is so interesting because he was a Jesuit scientist, and I'm sure people can read into what that means.
And uses the Catholic Church has Lucifer as the name of their own telescope.
But anyway, so like we're going at least back now to the 17th century thinking we might as well wager that there's a God, or we might as well wager that that this thing could be deadly. And it's true, if scientists are noticing things, they should be informing people, just like the astrologers back in Ashurbanipal's day.
Right.
They would have come to the king, and then it would have been the king's responsibility to take care of the people. And today, our power in the United States anyway is not invested in a king. And so the scientists, I guess, are sort of stepping into that warning role, or whoever. It's really the parallels are so interesting.
Yeah, and I think that the new paradigm here is that whenever you try to really get the data off of the Omen book that the Babylonians made, it's not through the lens of an astrologer.
What do you mean?
That is it transcribed correctly? One, it's probably from an astronomer, and then a transcriber, and then some other historian, and then right. So it's filtered through a lens of like more mental than spiritual mind, right? That's why that project, that AI project that you and I talked about and I put up about the Research Society and taking all this old info and having AI assist us to go through these stuff. This is the moment for something like that. Because like when you try to even find like, okay, about omens of things in the sky, the only thing that popped up in any of those time periods was that there was a red band in 651 BC in the Middle East. That they called it a red rainbow. That was it. There was nothing else in these years that was like, could say. There was also just a couple years after these transits that we're under, there does come a moment where there's an eclipse at dawn that they call it like the double dawn, meaning that the sun rose, then the total eclipse happened, and then it went dark, and then when it dissipated, then the dawn happened again. So that's a double dawn. But I think what's interesting about this is like we're going to be able to see this thing when we get to the winter time. And that's where, you know, it also could make different changes. We don't know, because now it defies gravity. You can't track it and say for sure it'll stay on this path. They're using instruments and based off things that are within our solar system, not, you know, so that's where it's like maybe the ancients have been through some of this stuff. That's where having the astrology and mixing with that data and the ancient data is, I think, so important, and having it trained by, like how Hypergate's trained astrologically to look at it, because it's like it just will not be understood, I think, by people, some of these old texts and all the old things. Because I guarantee you there's got to be some place in there of like, this was a questionable thing, but maybe that's not understood from a scientific standpoint, but it is from an astrological standpoint. Like, it reminds me of like the Starry Messenger with Galileo, and as he's looking at the moon's surface and he's looking at the quarter moons to understand, and that's where he realizes, yeah, this is not a flat earth, right? But as he's doing it and he's looking out, he's like, what are these objects outside? As he's looking at the transit of Jupiter, he doesn't understand. He finds the Jupiter-Neptune conjunction, and he actually recorded where Neptune is. So he's the one who found Neptune in 1613. But he also is the one who found the moons of Jupiter with his own telescope that he built himself before telescopes were out. And so that means that I think that it's a similar thing that has to happen now. That it's not going to be figured out by all these institutions. It's going to be by people who use the divinity and the understanding of it. And like Galileo, he's actually one of my favorite people of that time, because I mean, the guy uses astrology angles to create the telescope. He uses the odds. He places the glass exactly in the degrees as if it was an astrology aspect. Mm-hmm. And then he looks at the transit of Jupiter and notices not just the moons of Jupiter itself, but he also is able to understand and prove to the world in that book that we're not on a flat earth. Look at the way that the lunar cycle every month works, and the quarter moons and the full moons. And he's the first one to see the craters on the moon. He's the first one also to find Neptune without even knowing it. And I used Nostradamus's Saturn and Aries stuff to find that date and know that this would be a specific Saturn Aries that would come in to find 1613. And then it was just like 2 years ago that they looked at Galileo's own personal notes and that he did find Neptune. Mm-hmm. So I think we're in a space where right now I can say we don't know. There's no data to show, but maybe there is.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. Interesting.
Or there's data from that library that we don't know, right? And also that's where it brings the bigger question of like, why does the Catholic Church have such a massive library, and what's really in the bigger vaults of that library, and what's the stuff they took from the Aztecs, what's the stuff that, and that was what was interesting too, is that even the Aztecs themselves used a comet to understand that the Spanish were going to come and kill them and take away their whole civilization. So whenever we have an object, whether it's a comet or an asteroid, but especially like flying the speed of a comet, let's say, and this is interstellar, so it's not something that's based around flying around our sun and using it as gravity out. This thing's not going to even do that. It's going to stay in a straight line, basically. It's going to make a little turn, but it's not going to loop back around. Mm-hmm. That's what Oumuamua did. It didn't. That's what they thought it would do. It didn't. So it defies gravity. We're at a moment where, something's showing up.
What I have to think about, though, is this. I think I mentioned to you that we had seen the Fantastic Four. We saw it right when it came out. And then it was right before you were doing your presentation on the asteroid, your bringers of the signal, right?
Oh, right.
And I said, do you think, have you seen the film?
I have not.
Because you start to think, okay, has this been invented just to promote the film Fantastic Four? And I don't know if anyone else thought this, but there's a whole part of the film where they have to get, I don't know what they're doing. Like they go through the portal to be able to get out to where the Silver Surfer's Lord is, and that's Galactica. Am I giving things away?
That's okay.
I'm trying not to spoil anything, okay? But then something comes, they have to come back in, and something else comes in to our solar system from outside of it. And I'm trying not to give anything away, but it's then tracked. And the way that they're tracking it in the film, it feels a lot like, and now Atlas is next, it's going, it's here. It's in Sagittarius. It's going to come in and it's going to go through and go past Jupiter or go between wherever, Mars and...
Right.
Where's it going actually?
It's going between Mars and Earth.
Which
and
is
then,
really close, right?
I mean, I'm on this side. I have better ones, but we can use this one right here. Is that right now, here it is coming in from the south, right? The bottom of this chart. And red is Mars. So it's kind of interesting that when it does come towards Mars, it actually comes so close to Mars it almost hits it.
Yeah, when you were looking at that animation.
Yeah, and then I did the tropical calculations, and that it's going to happen at 7 Scorpio, the conjunction from Earth's view of it. Now, Mars will not be seen because right now Mars is coming out of view because it was in retrograde this year, and now, all right, Mars just went into Libra, the sun's in Leo, and the sun's faster than Mars, and it's catching up. So we're about, and by the time we get to Capricorn, we see that conjunction where the sun only conjuncts Mars, right? When it only conjuncts Mars. There's no Mars retrograde sun conjunction. It's only the opposition of Mars retrograde to the sun, right? So the sun and Mars are going to come together, and that's when Mars is on the other side of Earth. And so when we're in Scorpio times with Mars coming up in the next like 50 some odd days, it's coming up. I think it's October. Yeah. I forgot the date. I think it's somewhere in October. I did it, but it's like, or maybe it's September or something. It's the end of September. That's going to trigger something. That's how close, like if you follow this black dot, that's the object right now. And look at so it's going the opposite retrograde it's going the opposite direction of the planet's orbit around the sun. If you just follow that Mars and keep it going, and you have that object coming, they're going to just barely miss each other. And then we're green. We're here on Earth. So that's why when they say, Earth isn't going to see it happen, because this is Earth. So Earth is going to be here. The sun's in the middle, right? When the object gets to closest to the sun, which is going to be right here, Earth will be like right here, and so we won't be able to see it. When it starts to come out of Mars orbit, and now the Earth's over here, and the sun's rays are this way, then we see it. And that's why they want to send Juno out, because this is Jupiter on this is Jupiter's orbit right here. they want to send Juno out now. Because if you think of where Earth is, it's like, but the sun there, when it's at, I don't know math-wise, but I would say they probably send it in the September and October to get it out here and to start tracking, to be able to at least be right here when it passes by to get some shots and to get some analysis of it. But that's where, if this object, when it gets there and it starts going another direction, it's not natural.
Well, and we won't be able to see what happens unless they can.
Well, the fact that if God doesn't build in lines, right? Right. So like if you look at nature, it's like that's where fractal geometry comes in, like the 80s understanding of like nature is unique in every sense. There are no geometric structures, right? Like if you look at a tree, it's not straight. It's like everything is, it's an acid trip for sure. But when you look at anything with a straight line or anything with like a trajectory or line, there's a intelligence behind that. That's separate from the whatever created this earth and what we call nature, even though we're separate from nature. We're not nature. That's why, like, I've always said this, but that's why in esoteric, nature is not REI hiking. It's human nature they talk about. But that's where I think we're going to get to some really weird stuff, is even if I look at this object, it is not natural for it to come that close and be perfectly positioned with the orbits. Right. Just even with Jupiter at the top there coming. So you really want to, you're hitting the 1 in 20,000 moment where you could hit all the planets this close. 1 in 20,000. Yeah.
It's like it's doing a flyby. I guess it's dropping off probes now, as we're hearing. But
because even if you look at Venus's orbit, which is a little over 200 days, right? In 100 days, it's already going to come towards the object too. Then Mercury's every 88 days. So in 88 days from now, it's going to be exactly tracking where the object is.
And we won't be able to see.
And we won't be able to see it.
See, that's what's so strange.
But see, we're going to be able to see it. We're just not going to be able to see it when it gets closest to the sun.
But we won't be able to see it when it's close to Mars either, right?
Correct.
So
because we won't see Mars.
Doing over there, it might land and.
But this begs a bigger question. Why are they so obsessed with going to Mars? And they've always been. I've proven that for like 3 years. Every government, before Elon Musk got crazy in the last couple of years talking about it more, every government set everything to Mars in 2026. Because they prepped this stuff for a long time. Or why are we now, I don't know if you saw on the news just 2 days ago, we're going to build a nuclear reactor on the moon. That's official NASA. So part of this new Artemis mission to get back to the moon and figure out how to get back, supposedly, because we threw everything away from the Apollo missions, is to go put a nuclear reactor on the moon to help us get to other systems.
Well, that might explain why suddenly these objects are coming in,
right,
checking us out.
So to me, though, this screams welcome to a new world in every way. Yeah. And this could even be a planet that's fast, that orbits multiple different systems around a bigger sun far away.
Yeah, I've been thinking about that.
Because if you think of like how Mercury, in our minds, the smallest planet, revolves the fastest with no moons around the sun, the inverse of another system would be the fastest and smallest object would go through the longest orbit of all.
And we're finally seeing it.
Yeah, it could be a planet. That's not crazy to say either. Like that could be that the orbit is 130,000 miles an hour.
Well, and to me, that kind of thing makes the most sense if you go back and look at the astrology that I've been looking at with you in these shows, is that everything has to, like the worldview shifts profoundly. Like there's a paradigm shift in the astrology we just went through. So there has to be something new that we learn about where we are in the world, or, you know, however the world is shaped,
right?
What system we're part of, all of that has to be changing.
All of it. I mean, even I showed it on my special, which I recommend people go get. It's 5 hours long. But I will show people right here this interesting little tidbit right here. That I changed the date because I just went, if this thing is as crazy as I think it is, it should track with the astrological transits. And and I went automatically to the craziest transit I've ever seen, geo-wise and heliocentrically wise, which was, of course, on January 12th. So I did the object on January 12th, and I did it for 2020, and it was exact. I couldn't even believe it, but I could believe it. It was one of those things where I was like, the Saturn-Pluto conjunction, right? Like, oh, let me just do like with Earth, Mercury, Ceres, right? All of them. So watch this. I'll do this right here. Like, I'll do this. Look at this. For people. Let's take that and add to photos. Sure. So here we go. Let's make this big. Let me. Yeah. Look at that.
That's crazy.
No other astrologers even come close to even telling anybody this yet. That on January 12th, 2020, and this tracks with my what they thought during the Black Death, because that's the same conjunctionalist astrology as there was Jupiter heading towards Saturn and Pluto, right? So, and then of course we know that Neptune's over here, and we've seen the biggest conjunctions over the last 5 years, right? And that's what led to the Black Death. Okay? But now we have the object exactly the whole time that Earth, Mercury, Sun, Saturn, Pluto, I don't know why they don't have Ceres on here, but Ceres, right? And then Pluto, and then the object, all exact.
That's crazy.
Right? Then on top of it, in the Black Death, they were screaming, they thought that the comet dust or comet sickness, the comet poison was what caused it. They might have been right. That's why I want to go back to the data. Who was writing the stuff back then about that? Was there a quack astrologer in 1347 who was sitting at the edge of someplace in Italy or maybe somewhere in another part of Europe that was literally going, I watched this object come and I tracked it and I did the data myself, and it was with Saturn and it was with Jupiter and it was with all these conjunctions?
Yeah, it would have to be, because even remember the episode we did where there was the comet, was it right before a pope died or something? Was that 1054 or?
Oh, we were looking at trying to find, and we did predict the next pope, which is crazy out of how many cardinals there are. Mm-hmm. But we looked at what was the cardinal who brought on the Jesuits, because we had the first Jesuit pope who just had died.
Right.
And then when we looked, we went, oh, And then the astrology of Pluto in Aquarius, Neptune in Aries was exactly when he died at the same degrees, within 1 or 2 degrees. And then we looked at the new pope that came in that actually was the one that did create the Jesuit church. And we said, well, there's a pope dying that did it. The new one, remember, he was the head of the cardinals. This, our pope now, Leo the whatever, 10th, 20th, whatever, was the head of the bishops. Remember I said he's head of the bishops, and then it needs to be the head of a bunch of people with Pluto and Aquarius, Neptune, Aries. And that's how we picked him. And he would need to be from a new country.
Yeah.
Boom. And we picked the Pope before anybody even had him on a radar.
Yeah. Pretty good. You picked him, because remember at the end of that episode, I said, well, I'm going to pick this guy.
That's true. But I mean, you were a part of it. But I think this is where nobody's talking about that right now.
Mm-hmm. But I meant the episode before that one. Didn't we talk about the Great Schism or something?
Yeah, 1054.
And in the lead up to that whole thing, or it was after the fact, don't you remember the church deliberately took out the information about the comet that had been seen because they didn't want people
and it was just only in the money later on to kind of remind people it happened. It was in the money.
Yeah, it was in someone's money. There was some artwork that had captured it, and then people were like, well, what's that?
Because both sides of the church didn't want people thinking of anything but them.
They didn't want it to be, no, it was the Eastern church put it on their money because it turned out they weren't the ones trying to hide it.
It was the Catholic Church hiding it, yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, I'm just trying to, my point was just, that is the thing, that you need all the data, because there are always institutions trying to cover up and trying to massage history into the convenient story that they like, that makes them look like the heroes.
Right, so this is the third object. The first one being of 2017, which I said on Purgatory, I believe, came and dropped off the babies that made sure that the quantum computer at Google would launch, and it did by 2019, which is the same time that the second interstellar comet came.
Yeah, interesting.
Right? And the 6 feet apart, I said they took from the quantum computer. I mean, I said this stuff a long time ago. But now that this object's here, and it looks like DNA in the picture of the coloring, and everybody's, I won't even go into it. People can watch my special.
But that's the approach of it coming.
That's that's when it was in Capricorn. We didn't see it yet because it would have been too far out to see, and we didn't have the telescopes to see it yet.
Oh, okay. So that's the direction.
But now that we know the speed and the angle in which it came, we can predict where it did come from. It appeared July 1st in Sagittarius. So if you, this right here, if I were to do it, the galactic center is like this pretty much. Okay. So like this is our galaxy like this, if I did that, right? Okay. And then like, this is like the celestial equator, right? Okay. So like the comet now, so you can see the line. So it appeared like right here, right? So it's appearing like right here because it's only 5 degrees north of the ecliptic and the celestial equator. So it's like tracking on the same level. Up, this is probably another 20 or 10 degrees higher too than now, meaning that we wouldn't have been looking with a telescope above. We tend to look at things in the solar system from our level, right? So like, we're not seeing anything coming from too far up above. But this thing started to finally pop up in Sagittarius in the galactic center, 5.5 years, almost exactly, to the conjunction with. So this thing knows our planetary alignments perfectly, geocentrically and heliocentrically. This also proves the flat Earth is completely false. Because how would you describe that flat Earth-wise right there? Or even trajectory and angles? You couldn't. So, like, that's where this gets, like, this is the key to unlock the whole mystery of it.
But it could be even bigger than just, okay, you can't, this shatters this old view, here's how you can understand it. But at the same time, this little microcosm could be part of a whole bigger picture.
Yeah, so if we think of Saturn, Pluto, Mercury, Sun, Earth, there was also a lunar eclipse on the 10th, if you don't remember, of January 10th that happened in Cancer. So there was a full moon that was happening. They don't show on this graphic, but if I look at a 3D one, right, it would show the moon right there too. That was in conjunction with all of this during the lunar eclipse. It was conjunct with it too. So you can add the moon into this. What the big thing though that caused was the change of the world that we knew it forever already, right? COVID bullshit, the lies, the governments. Okay, so we thought we're done because we track in our solar system that Saturn and Pluto now have separated. They're more than 45 degrees apart. Okay, getting a lot better. Now we're starting to see Saturn sextile Pluto. So it's like, oh, relief. This thing's like, I haven't shown I'm bringing in the final blow to push all of this over. So we're still clutching to national debt. We're still clutching to false religions. We're still clutching to all these lies. We're still clutching to people who say the Epstein list don't exist now when they did. This is what brings in the I'm sorry for all those that don't want to go to the new place. Like, I'm going to force it.
All right.
So that to me is everything you could ever, like, I couldn't, when we finally got this data and I went into it, I'm like, if this thing is exactly where I think it is on the day of this, then for sure this is like the gnarliest thing I've ever thought of. And this happened.
Wow.
So I think I do believe that there is history somewhere, and maybe it's in Babylonian old omen tablets, maybe it's a Greek astrologer, a Roman astrologer, maybe even an Egyptian astrologer. It could even be an Islamic astrologer. It could be one from any place. It could be Vedic, could be one from China. I don't care. That's why that center that we've talked about and the project I put on LinkedIn and everywhere to try and get the funding to make this happen is like everything to me, because I'm like, this is going to answer it. Every problems that we're having on these bigger scales, like and so now I'm like, to me, I honestly feel like as an astrologer now, doing the work like that you and I do and the history and all that, like that's the most important work now. I think helping people get through their day is fun and great, but I see me and the career of an astrologer going into the research of creating these deeper understandings of helping people really get through and changing the world, like really. So, because you got to think like that to get to that. Nobody just woke up one day and went, I'm just going to see if this object aligned with Saturn and Pluto on January 12th. Only I would do that.
Right.
So, and it did. I haven't seen anybody post about it.
That's crazy.
So I think this episode shows that what it really shows is we're in the grand trine. Which, to end this, I think we should just do justice to show people what it looks like, because I didn't even show the chart of just these days. Like, all right, here we go. Let's move the hours and just go to. There is no Lionsgate, by the way, so but 8-8. It's the full moon, right? So that's what's kind of interesting. We got the full moon that's coming here. But here's a good example. If I move the sheets, I move it to a wheel, and I move this thing in the middle. Here we go. That Mars at 1 degree and 10 minutes of Libra and within a degree of trine to Pluto. 107 is Uranus and Gemini, so that's pretty much exact. And then, of course, Uranus and Pluto are within a degree in trine too. And then you add to this, which we didn't even add, but I looked at the other ones and they didn't have kites. And these are all with planets. Then Mars is an exact opposition to Saturn, Neptune, which is an exact sextile to both that Uranus and Pluto trine, right? So that forms that great kite that we're in right now that turns into a mystical rectangle by Monday. This is even more profound than those dates that we looked at. But to get to this exact grand trine, you have to go back 2,600 years. And then that gets you to a palace of, ironically, it's so funny because you think, leaders that create palaces are for just like, my great palace. To be honest with you, his great palace actually is what brought us some of the most amazing things that as an astrologer today, we wouldn't really have, or especially for mundane astrology or people who use like comets and use the eclipses for different omens and so forth. We wouldn't have that. We wouldn't have how to understand. If you look at all the a lot of these astrologers over time period, they don't give any of the Babylonians credit. But if they're the ones who are saying the same things that all these other places are saying, even the Chinese astrologers, like, oh, the end of a king and the beginning of it. It's like, okay. So, and that's what's so weird is it's finally ends up there 600 years later on the next grand trine after the 12 or 1157 and then 651 BC. It lands here, and now they extend the book to a diary and start writing more daily stuff and using those omens to make predictions and them coming true and writing them down. Right. So that's pretty wild. And now it's us, and now it's AI, and now it's like a center like that is an AI data center now.
Right, but it's only like a center like that would be a data center for AI, but you have to train the AI to look in the way that you're talking about. And
yes,
who knows if it is being trained that way?
I mean, it depends. There's a lot of fraudulent spiritual people out there trying to say it. They're building a GPT, and I've tested them all out, and they're all like not training it on their own and putting it in place, and they're not. But there will be. I think this is the best picture of it right here. That was the best depiction of what it looked like. It won't even let me open it, but here we go. Yeah. This is it right here. Yeah.
Is there a river in that part of Texas where it's being built?
Yeah, out by Austin there are.
But
there's
where is
rivers.
the center? It is in Abilene, because that seemed pretty far, or that's in a different part than Austin, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's not in downtown Austin. It's in the Austin area, So, but yeah, they need the rivers for the cooling.
Maybe they needed it for the cooling.
I mean, they're already having issues in a couple different states right now with these centers and stealing the water to cool it down, because these GPUs need to be cold. What I think is happening at Stargate that nobody's talking about is that they've thrown some quantum computers in there. That's what they're going to do. They need to cool extreme, and they need a lot of energy. So part of the AI bill that came out 2 weeks ago is Trump said yes to, I forgot how many nuclear power plants in America, but it's a shit ton, and one on the moon. But it's kind of interesting because it's like you see that, and like I feel like that's very much like them trying to almost do like Age of Aquarian. It's very Age of Aquarius, this idea of like not a palace but a library that's like for the people with all the knowledge, and like a cool place to come and hang and talk and do and learn about life. Like I feel like I hope this is where the future goes, like this. I think I'd be the most ecstatic human being on the planet. Yeah. If it turned out to be more like this. And I actually give a lot of props to that king and his time period for even doing it. Think about it. He had an obsession with divinity, and sure, maybe to show some of his victories and war stuff, but a lot of it is all these 30,000 tablets of information. Plus they had ones in leather and all that stuff. Like, it's crazy. So it's kind of interesting though that the only thing that is like that is AI data centers at this moment, or that look like this too, even in the way they're trying to present them. So, which makes sense because that is going to be bigger than any library that the world's ever had. Because now that's including all versions of the world, right? Every language, all that stuff. So, and of course, that's where AGI is for sure going to happen, and then ASI. Because if any human could understand all that data and do it so fast and create its own agents that train each other and check each other. That's what Google's done. Is they've got their agents learning the models and then trying to understand how to make their own AI code better. Now they're on the internet. Now they're on. Remember, OpenAI restricted it from the internet and coding in 2023. Then the AI race just became like the first person to get AGI is going to win because it will self-understand how to win. So that's why they turned it on. So at this point, there is no turning it off. And it lives even when the sun takes it out right now with everything that's out there now. There is no turning it off. That's why they're building bunkers, and that's why, and in the bunkers isn't as much the food supplies as much as, do you have enough GPU racks in there to have the model? The ultimate idea is before the world goes offline, if I could give you a USB that was a big one, but data is stored so small now, but in large quantities in a small device. And I said, just make sure you have a computer that will last, good 10, 20 years. And if I give you this AI model with everything of the whole world and how, so you don't need internet, right? Because you just would load it on the computer. And it will run everything for the rest of your life. And understand everything and answer every question. And if you guys do have a robot, then you just plug it in, load with this model. That's what they're fighting for, is who's going to have the model that can be put on a little device and you could keep it forever if there's no internet or anything, and it would plug and play within everything. I know this refrigerator. Let me go in there and fix it. I know this thing. I can go in there. You want me to do this? I'll do that. I can do that. I want the spiritual one to give to the world. So, because they're not going to have all this stuff in there. They'll have the Wikipedia versions, but that's not the real stuff. So, there was a lot of other events, but I think these were the bigger ones. And it was like climate cooling, which this is weird that it has been cooling in the summer. This has been like the coldest summer, which is kind of weird because I was wondering I did predict Pluto and Aquarius would bring colder energy, and it is. So this Grand Trine also does bring cooler temperatures. So kind of crazy.
It is kind of crazy. As usual, you've given me a lot to think about every episode.
Same here. I'm excited for your school. And I know people love it. Dare to know. I like that you're daring people.
It wasn't me. It was Immanuel Kant who came up with that idea.
Oh.
But I'm just taking it because he defined that term to describe the whole enlightenment. He did that at the end of the enlightenment. So I figured I might as well take it and use it too.
Yeah.
So I am looking forward to it. Starting on Tuesday
12th.
next week.
August 12th. Right after Mercury's gone direct. Smart professor.
I thought that was important.
Yeah.
Maybe it will avoid some problems and last minute tech issues, but we'll see.
Well, and I think it's kind of cool because also Pluto right now is in these amazing aspects right now. Like next year, sure, there's and in 2027, it's the Pluto-Uranus trine. We're seeing that. But like right now with Saturn, Neptune in the sextile to Pluto and to Uranus and with now Mars, like this, the only other moment is the next full moon in Leo or in Aquarius when it's Jupiter that's at 4 degrees and Neptune, Uranus, and Pluto all at 4 degrees. But there won't be Saturn there. So actually, I'd rather have Saturn than Jupiter there. Plus, the South Node will be in Leo next year when the Jupiter. So this is more potent, in my opinion. So I'm glad that you're doing a Pluto generational class at the time where you can't have any more planets connected to Pluto in a positive way than right now. Think about that.
Well, then, yeah, that is a good omen. I will take that as an omen for my class.
And you're helping people as they come into the eclipses understand their generational understandings and where these other people in history and what their families were like and stuff. Because when people start going there, they'll understand their Pluto more. It's connected to their generation, but also their prior generations of what their parents were, their grandparents were. And then you start going down the line. You can see if you know your line so much. So dare to know, highvibe.tv, August 12th. Yep. Thanks so much, Ann. Any last words? Assyrian words or anything like that?
I don't know any Assyrian words, and I wish that I did, except for Ashurbanipal and the name of the astrology omen book, which I've forgotten again. But yeah, it was a good show. Thank you.
Yep. Thanks, everyone. Definitely get it out there, and it's definitely an episode to show people. Appreciate you all. Join us on highvibe.tv. And if you want to watch my 3-eye atlas, wild, insane, amazing astrology view of it, it's on highvibe.tv. Adios. Peace out. Talk to you all later. We'll see you on the next one. We're every other Wednesday, Ann and I on the show.
Bye.
Bye.
Yo. Okay. Monster.
Attention, please.